kick on. Make sure it goes live. Do you see it now? Okay, I think you're live right now, Pete. Go ahead.
Welcome to the Gruber Morning Show, live from Phoenix, Arizona. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner. This is a special Monday edition of the morning show, and you get to see what live really is today.
Yes, and live so far has had a false start, so this is our second pass, but today is the 15-year anniversary. Are we still down?
No, you're good.
We're good. Okay. All right. It's probably because we're doing this on a Monday. We normally do this on a Tuesday.
That's right.
And the hardware cooperates. It's not used to us doing this on a Monday. The reason that we're doing it today on a Monday is because this is February 17th, and 15 years ago in 2010, there was a plane crash that took the lives of three very instrumental engineers at Tesla, which was a very small company at the time, only a few hundred employees. The details are a Cessna 310R dual engine airplane was flying out of Palo Alto, California, being piloted by Doug Bourn, one of the engineers involved, with two other Tesla employees, also engineers, Brian Finn and Andrew Ingram, as passengers. The three engineers were traveling from Tesla's Bay Area facility, Palo Alto, to Southern California, Hawthorne, or LA as they called it, where they were going to land at the Hawthorne Municipal Airport. The Tesla had, at that time, a design studio in Hawthorne at the SpaceX facility and working on the early versions of the Tesla Model S.
Right.
The plane took off just before 8 a.m. local time in Palo Alto in dense fog and near zero visibility conditions. And according to the FAA, the air traffic control tower had cautioned Bourn about the heavy fog that morning, but the pilot proceeded to take off despite the poor conditions.
Yeah, they had said to Doug that they would not clear him for takeoff, but if he was willing to accept the risk, then he would be free to go.
But he's on his own.
But he was on his own.
Right. So the Cessna lost its bearing in the fog, and it struck the top of a 60-foot high-voltage transmission tower about a mile from the airport.
You want to show a picture of that tower?
Let's do that. And they were supposed to take a right and instead took a left. And this is the result. What happened was the impact sheared off one of the wings and brought down live power lines and a part of the tower itself, as you can see here.
Mm-hmm.
With the wing gone, the aircraft broke apart and plummeted into the residential neighborhood of East Palo Alto. And one detached wing, engulfed in flames, slammed onto the roof of a house that hosted a daycare center. Fortunately, none of the children or people on the ground were injured. You did a little additional research. What did you find?
I did. This daycare center was a place that a lady ran out of her home. She had about 7 children on a normal day. Only one of the kids had arrived so far. It was early enough in the morning, just after 8 a.m., that when the wing slammed onto the house, obviously they thought it was either an earthquake or something, and then they saw the burning plane flying, rolling down the street, and knew that they needed to get out. So none of them were injured.
So there was other debris, including a landing gear and an engine that hit nearby homes and vehicles, igniting fires in at least 2 of the houses and several cars on the street. The main fuselage of the plane came to rest in the middle of Beach Street amid burning wreckage, and I've got a picture of that as well for you here. Here we go. It looks like they had just crossed the water there.
Yeah, what was supposed to happen, as this picture demonstrates, is that the plane took off and took about a 45-degree turn left and ended up hitting the power line and going to Beach Street. What was supposed to happen is that the plane was supposed to go up and turn right over the bay. And then they would have been free both from any power lines or dangers in that area. And there were noise ordinances in place, and there still are today, So the fact that he turned left and went up over the neighborhood would have violated noise ordinances as well.
So the crash had immediate ripple effects in the Bay Area. The severed transmission lines caused a massive power outage across Palo Alto and parts of Silicon Valley. It cut electricity to over 28,000 residents and businesses, including major companies like Facebook and Hewlett-Packard. Hewlett-Packard for most of the day. Again, the preliminary findings showed that the plane's engines were operating at near full power when it hit the tower, suggesting no engine failure had occurred.
Right. There was obviously some speculation before the NTSB came back with their conclusions that maybe the left engine on the dual engine plane had in fact either failed or had not started properly and caused the plane to veer left. We don't know. Well, all that we know is that at the time that the plane hit the tower, it was both engines full throttle trying to gain altitude.
Mm-hmm. Have another picture here. This is a picture of Doug Bourn, the pilot, the lead engineer, and he is experienced but became disoriented immediately after takeoff. He just never gained sufficient altitude to avoid those transmission lines in near zero visibility. Now, an interesting thing about this, in preparation for this podcast, I had asked the number of people that were there at Tesla during the day to chime in and give us their impression of what happened and how they may have been involved. And Drew Baglino was really the only one I spoke with. And Drew was there at Tesla for 18 years. He was one of the very early employees. He became the VP of engineering eventually and left after 18 years in April of last year, 2024. Right. But, he shared with me that he was supposed to be on the plane with them that morning. And he decided at the last minute to sleep in because he lived in San Francisco, and it would have been a drive for him to get to Palo Alto so that they could all four take off and go to Hawthorne.
Wow, okay.
So he elected to take a commercial plane that morning, and he would have been one of these four if that was not the case.
And one of the things I remember reading was that Drew got to the Hawthorne studio and asked the guys, where is everybody? What's going on here? Why aren't Doug and everybody here? And that's when they told him that there had been a plane crash up in Palo Alto.
Yeah. We'll talk a bit about the impact on Tesla here in a moment, but let's go through each of the engineers involved. And it was Doug Bourn is at the top of the list here. He was the pilot. He was a senior electrical engineer at Tesla, 56 years old in 2010. He earned his engineering degree from Michigan Technological University and was an alumni at Stanford University, class of 73, before joining Tesla in 2005. He worked at the Palo Alto design firm IDEO as an engineering consultant, which was a company that actually Tesla subcontracted some design work to, and they eventually closed that particular office. And Drew told me that they were fortunate enough to hire a number of engineers from this closed-down operation. And he was also a licensed pilot and certified flight instructor who held a pilot's license since 1974, so he was not new to this.
No, he was not. And in fact, he owned a small aviation company on the side while working at Tesla. And that company was also named in the lawsuit along with some of the lawsuits that came after the fact.
He was an avid flyer, skydiver, motorcyclist, and he shared his passion by teaching others to fly and mentoring a local high school robotics team. Folks, this was 2010. This was before robots were really a thing, so that was pretty remarkable. He joined Tesla's electric powertrain team early in the company's history to help build the first Tesla Roadster sports car. Drew was telling me that Doug was heavily committed and knowledgeable about the analog PEM in the Roadster. There were two variations. There was the original analog PEM, which was an offshoot from the AC propulsion design and project. It proved to be unstable, unreliable, but if anybody had any questions about the analog PEM, Doug was the guy that they went to. He became very familiar with it. And Drew was actually the one that decided to take a different direction and started working on the digital PEM, which is what's in the Roadsters today. So I asked Drew, I said, well, the digital PEM, of course, solved a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm.
But I said, are any of those left in existence in cars anywhere? Hoping that we'd hear that, well, yeah, JB's got one, or,
Yeah.
they're all gone. Apparently, that it was such a lousy design that they had scrubbed them all, not realizing that later on it may have historical significance.
Right.
But no one really expected the Roadster to be a long-term car. Like most cars, you have a model and then it ends, and then you go to other models. And
Well, and if you're running a company of, about 600 employees and you're not profitable and you don't know if your car is going to work and you've sold maybe, as 1,500 of these cars or so, do you really think that it's going to end up needing to be preserved for posterity at some point?
Yeah. So Bourn also managed many of Tesla's labs at the time and projects. The engineers who worked with him at the time in 2007 recall that he had a large amount of stuff in the electrical lab, tools, parts, equipment. Sounds like your typical engineer.
Oh, yes.
You go in our lab and there's equipment everywhere. So Doug, and this is according to one of the engineers, he said Doug was a fine man, a superb engineer, and a big part of the success of Tesla Motors. No, I'm sorry, that was actually a quote from Martin Eberhard, who actually was, he was also involved in this, although he had already left. Drew was saying that, by the time the guys got there, Martin had left, and I think that was in 2007.
Okay.
But Bourne's work with the Roadster electronics, they say, was the foundation to Tesla's technology for the future cars. By 2010, he had started to transition to the Model S development, applying his expertise to the first sedan that Tesla was building. And that's what brought him to the Hawthorne studio that day.
Now, our second person is Brian Finn. Brian was 42 at the time of the accident, and he was Tesla's senior manager of interactive electronics at the time of his passing. We have a picture of Brian up on the screen now. Brian grew up in Illinois and graduated from Northern Illinois University with a Bachelor of Science in Physics and a Master of Science in Electrical Engineering in 1992. He spent the 1990s developing automotive electronics. He worked at a smaller company called Nelson Industries in Wisconsin. And then later, he and several of the Nelson Industries employees got together and co-founded an acoustics tech firm called Digisonics. This firm specialized in creating adaptable digital noise cancellation.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so he earned several patents in noise control. And in fact, his work in this area and the patents that he held first led him to California to work for Volkswagen. In 2001, he went to Volkswagen's Electronic Research Lab in Palo Alto. He led a team working on in-car technology for noise cancellation, for stereos, for technology like voice controls and navigation systems as well. And then that led him to 2000 and looking here in 2007, I believe, he ended up going into Tesla for much the same role. He was considered a very talented musician. He was also considered a man of the soil. He had a green thumb.
Mm-hmm.
He enjoyed tending an organic garden and planting trees on the rural land that he hoped to retire to. Incidentally, Brian lived, if you wanted to bring up that crash photo, the map.
Okay.
Brian lived just north of Cypress Street.
Oh, really? Wow.
So,
Very close.
So
Yeah,
when he crashed, his house was right in that neighborhood.
Amazing.
So he was a dedicated outdoorsman. He loved skiing, cycling, scuba diving, motorcycling, and he joined Tesla in 2008 in July. Uh, Basically, he was drawn by the chance to innovate on the upcoming Model S.
Mhm.
Um, he was put onto the project of working on the car's in-car electronics.
Yeah, that's what Drew actually was saying. He said that all three of them eventually migrated to working on the body control modules on the Model S.
Mhm.
There would be drivetrain and then body control,
Yep.
and these guys are heavily involved in the body control portion.
Yes. So Brian was known as a very generous and humble person. He often talked very proudly about his young daughter. His relationship with his wife was a little more on the rocks at the time of the accident, but he certainly loved his young daughter. She was 2 years old at the
Oh,
time
really?
of the
It's a
accident.
great age.
Yeah.
Um, he was also instrumental, they say, in the large central touch screen. You know, that 17-inch screen.
Yes.
When the Model S came out was really a game changer. There was nothing that large at that time in a vehicle. The Roadster had a little 3-inch screen. You're familiar as the Roadster community,
Hmm.
but the 17-inch screen really set a new path.
That was largely Brian's idea, in fact.
Mm-hmm.
It was his idea to blend the consumer electronics, laptops and computer monitors were just starting to come out as LCDs in larger screen sizes, and the automotive electronics. And so his thought was, hey, why not put together this really nice big screen and make it like an infotainment system
Mm-hmm.
that also contains all of your navigation. It becomes kind of the central brain of this car. So the Brian Finn had an incredible influence on the Model S development. And the reason you see these 17-inch screens on the S and the Y and the 3, and they're starting to get bigger on other cars, is mostly because of Brian Finn and the efforts that he spent in that project.
And both Andrew and Brian actually had they had an electronics background in things like audio, which is important if you think about it. In a electric car, you have an enormous amount of high frequency signals that are buzzing around.
Yep.
In the ICE vehicle, you've got spark plugs and you've got spark gaps, basically. In an EV, you have radio frequency signals that are bouncing everywhere. And of course, the stellar audio system in the Model S, which also I think was revolutionary.
At the time, it was definitely, and it was the patent that he owned from his time in Digisonics, for adaptive digital signal processing.
Mm-hmm.
Let me say that 3 times. And the whole reason for that adaptive digital DSP, and it's called basically ADSP, it was used in applications like noise cancellation in environments where you had a variety of signals that were coming in. And so the digital noise cancellation was going to have to adapt to what it was hearing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, your car listens, adapts, and cancels.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So then the third engineer was Andrew Ingram. And let me bring up a picture of that young man. There we go. He was 31 at the time in 2010. He was a native Californian born in 1979, and he showed an early knack for engineering. In 6th grade, he even built an eco-friendly air conditioning system for his room. He had an engineering degree from Harvey Mudd College, graduated in 2001. He began his career at Dolby Labs in San Francisco around 2004. Again, strong audio background.
Yep.
He began and he cultivated a passion for high-fidelity sound systems. And as we mentioned, when the Model S came out and you realize that you no longer needed to spend money on getting an audio upgrade, that the car came with a appreciable, high-fidelity sound system.
Mm-hmm.
That also was a game changer for vehicles. He had a passion for math and science at a young age, and he was always ready to apply his talents. So he joined the final development of the Tesla Roadster in the early design phase and the early design phase of the Model S. This was about 2.5 years before the crash. Was definitely passionate about electronics and exquisite audio systems, according to Elon. And he eagerly applied that passion to Tesla. One of his first assignments was ensuring that the Model S's complex electrical systems did not produce interference with the car's premium stereo system. This task, of course, leveraged the audio expertise from Dolby that he helped implement electromagnetic shielding and filtering so that the electric drivetrain and electronics could coexist with crystal clear audio for the driver. You know, there's an interesting story for the Roadster community here. No one really listens to AM radio anymore. But if you turn your AM radio to a particular frequency, and I think it's down around 600 kilohertz, you can actually hear faintly the drivetrain, the PEM, and the motor, which emits something near that frequency.
I would not be surprised at all because the 600 band would be right in line with the 60 cycle AC electricity going to the motor.
Yep. So, but yeah, that was an interesting side note. They probably never considered it developing the Roadster because who listens to AM?
Right.
You know. So his electrical experience, of course, the engineering experience, definitely was of value to Tesla, and he became a versatile engineer known for crossing departmental lines to solve problems. You know what that sounds like to me? He was a team player.
Yeah.
Very important in any small company, vital actually. But he was able to merge three great interests at Tesla: music, cars, and green technology, all into one role. His work on the audio integration and electronics testing for Model S contributed again to the high quality driving experience that Tesla became known for. All right.
You know, when this crash occurred, the response, there was immediate and there was far-reaching responses. Inside Tesla, when the news of the crash came, it was really met with shock and a lot of deep grief. Elon Musk, CEO of Tesla, quickly published a public statement on the next day, February 17th, or on that day, February 17th. He's saying it was a tragic day for us. Emphasized that Tesla at the time was a small, tightly knit company, and they were feel the loss profoundly, and they did. The company initially withheld the employees' names, but soon they were known and the families were notified. Musk also honored the engineers with a heartfelt post on Tesla's blog, where he said, "Doug, Brian, and Andrew were valued members of the Tesla family." The city of Palo Alto, in their next council meeting, they had a moment of silence and an early adjournment for the meeting in honor of the three people who lost their lives as community members. And of course, we had the impact to the people who lost homes and cars and et cetera as well. For the Tesla people, Elon said these people were working on something they believed in very deeply, and that they would definitely be missed. Tesla's leadership, even all the way up to J.B. Strobel, who was the CTO at the time, everybody was just stunned by the loss. Grief counselors were brought in. Tesla did provide support to the victims' families. I'll get to that in a little more in just a second. Mm-hmm. And in the days immediately after the work, there was a lot of grieving going on, a lot of productivity lost, just because people couldn't believe that something this significant had happened. And while these guys weren't the top level executives, in some ways they were more important than the top level executives because they were there was such a demand on everybody's skills that even one person getting lost was a real hit.
Well, you know, one thing that Drew shared with me, and Drew was a younger engineer at the time as well, mm-hmm. is that Doug Bourn really was a father figure in that engineering community at Tesla.
Oh, sure. As a 56-year-old, he would have been one of the older engineers there.
Hmm.
And, and Brian would have been one of the, just one of the rock stars because he was the guy, he was the inventor. He was the guy with all the patents. At the time of his death, he held 43 patents on various things related to noise cancellation and sound technology. And so he was a real key toward in the Model S development. And Tesla itself was just gearing up. They had just started their initial public offering process.
Hmm.
And so that IPO that they had filed for just a month earlier, it kind of rocked everything. Now Musk took the time as a team leader and said, that these guys are so passionate about what they did. The best way for us to go forward to honor them is actually to continue doing the work that they were passionate about.
Hmm. Good point. The thumbnail that we have there is actually a picture of what your Tesla Roadster, if you have a 2.x Tesla Roadster, is able to deliver. And I'm going to show you a video how you can access this. And here. All right. My video is not showing up, guys. Can you play it over there?
Is it that?
Oh, wait a minute. It's
Right
right
there.
here. Okay, here we go. So in order to access the screen, what you do is bring this up here. There we go. You have to, there's my computer. All right. I'm going to start at the beginning here. You turn on your Roadster, you set the emergency brake, and then you will get the screen that has a little eye in the upper left-hand corner, information. Press that. You go to page 2, and there is a memorial button. And that is an Easter egg that is in each of the 2.x Roadster vehicles and available for you to view. Some of you may have thought, what is this? If you ever stumbled across it, it's not that easy to get to. But it is hidden in the firmware, and it's a reminder that Doug, Brian, and Andrew live on within the very product that they helped create. Now, why isn't it available on 1.5s? Because this event happened before 20 or after 2010.
This happened later. One of the other impacts that Tesla had to deal with, anyone who ever works with Tesla will know that Tesla strictly prohibits any flights that are not just commercial flights.
Really? Okay.
So all employees that travel have to travel on commercial flights, and it's because of this accident. When one of the pieces of aftermath from this accident is that once the NTSB determined that pilot error was the most likely cause of the crash, the families of the other two members, so of Doug and of Andrew, and the people from the houses that had their homes or their cars destroyed, they all ended up filing lawsuits against both Doug's estate and Tesla.
Interesting. Okay.
And Tesla did not get through the last of those lawsuits until middle of 2015. It was over 5 years later. And it was, incidentally, it was the daycare, the lady that had the daycare in her house. She was able to receive enough of a settlement to pay off the mortgage, but unfortunately, she was not able to receive enough of a settlement to rebuild.
Mm-hmm. And it took 5 years for that to settle eventually, you were saying?
And it took 5 years for that to eventually settle.
Amazing. And, Tesla is a generous company in many ways. They actually provided financial support for the families affected during this time as well. And as you mentioned, the city of Palo Alto also contributed to this tribute. And see if we've got the information here. I guess I don't have it, but yeah, there was something to do with the board or the city.
It is here actually. It's above the picture where it says the city of Palo Alto did formally adjourn a city council meeting in memory of Doug Bourn, Brian Finn, and Andrew Ingram shortly after the accident. The gesture, which was read aloud by the mayor of the city, honored the 3 Tesla engineers for their contributions to the community, and they acknowledged the tragedy's impact on the region.
Mm-hmm.
One of the impacts that I know I'm bouncing a little bit here. One of the impacts at first, the community and Pacific Gas and Electric thought that Palo Alto might be without power for months
Oh, really? Wow.
because they took down. We saw
Yeah.
that tower; it was completely taken down, and that is the power line into the Palo Alto region.
Yeah. Okay.
And so they were able to get power restored, figure out a way to get around the grid, but it took them most of it. So
A picture that I just popped up here, guys, is a picture of Drew and Elon, and this was at one of the earnings calls. They used to get up together during the last few earnings calls. Drew, by the way, left Tesla in April of 2024.
mm-hmm.
But prior to that time, he became Senior Vice President of Powertrain and Energy Engineering, and he held that job since 2016. He reported directly to Elon, and he was seen as the unofficial chief of operations by many of his colleagues. I know that Elon was also affected by this because about 7 years ago or so, we did a newsletter on this event and a tribute basically to the three engineers. And I sent a copy to Elon, and he doesn't respond often, but that particular one he responded to.
That's cool.
So when I asked Drew about the three engineers, he talked about David Bourn being the analog PM expert, and they all came from IDO, a company that did some contract manufacturing there. In 2005, apparently Doug had begun to work on the PEM, and a bunch of the other engineers assisted with that. But anyway, any problems with that analog PEM, Doug was the guy that they went to. There were only 20 or so engineers hired at the time when Doug got there, so it was a very small company. The eventual goal then was to digitize the PEM, which is something that Drew worked on, and he spearheaded that project with a different engineering team, eventually subcontracting the building of the digital PEM to Chroma in Taiwan. So all of you that have the 2.X Roadsters, those were built in Taiwan by Chroma. They were also a contract manufacturer. And even in 2010, losing an engineering or these three engineers had a huge impact on the small team that was involved at Tesla at the time. Drew has since left. He started a company. It was a grind, he says, for 18 years, but he's having fun now. Drew is involved with several companies and that are working to address the demand for energy from AI. And these companies include Stripe, Scale Microgrids, and Paces_AI. All right. I think that's all of the pictures that I have to share with you here. There's one other guy, another picture here, standing in between Drew and Elon, and that's J.B. Strobel, who was also there during the day. I was unable to get a hold of him to get his story on how all this went down at the time. There they are, all three of them. All right, looks like we've got one comment from Mustafa El Gamal. He says, for a second, I thought it was Tuesday.
Thanks for joining us, Mustafa.
This is the 15-year anniversary, so we decided to have it on a Monday. All right, so other Tesla Roadster news. Let's see if we can get a few items out of the way here. We've got an image of a Tesla Roadster that just came up for sale. And this is VIN number 1403. It is a low mileage, reasonably low mileage at about 9,700 miles.
Mm-hmm.
It's been through our service center. It had the PPF removed. Tends to yellow on the Arctic White Roadsters, so it's a good idea to take it off for not just that reason, but the aging reasons that happen with those Roadsters. It has a full suspension upgrade and a fairly healthy CAC, which is reading 144.2, charges to 165 miles in standard mode, and it is a sport Roadster. That 8th digit in the VIN tells you that being a 3. If it was a 1, it would be a base version Roadster. It's got some nice carbon fiber accents. You can see the spoiler and the hood vanes and the front nose lip are carbon fiber. And it's being offered for $99,000.
Seems like a really good price for that particular vehicle.
Mm-hmm. Rahat Salwan from YouTube says, "Hey team, can you please explain what causes the 85 kWh pack from a model 2012 through 2015 Model S to fail? What are some preventive measures one can take to lower the risk of pack failing?" Well, there are still some design issues, although I don't think Tesla would call it that, in the early battery packs. Water ingress, for example. In the early Model S's, the condensate tube that comes from the AC actually drips on top of the battery pack.
Right.
And they're using steel bolts. Eventually, those rust. And if they get bad enough, then the water can get inside the battery pack, which is the early death of a battery pack. Any kind of fluid water intrusion will begin to create electroplating, basically killing cells and modules. Another item that is preventable, there's a seal inside the large drive unit that tends to fail. And when it does, then you get coolant migrating into the inverter, which is right next to the motor. And electronics doesn't like moisture. It doesn't like coolant.
Right.
And you can actually kill the inverter, which is the electronics that converts all that DC to three-phase AC with any kind of water ingress or coolant ingress. There is what's called a coolant delete option, which a number of independent maintenance organizations now offer, including ourselves, and that will prevent that. We narrowly caught one of our manager's cars, Claude.
Yes.
It came in for a rear tire replacement, and they decided to take off it's called the encoder sensor on the rear of the drive unit.
Okay.
By taking that out, you look at it, if it has any moisture, any wetness, you've got some water or some coolant starting to migrate inside the inverter housing. We caught that, cleaned it up, and put a coolant delete plate on that car. It'll probably run now for many more years. What most people assume is happening with these battery packs is end of life. And that just isn't the case with these 18650 cells in the Model S's or even the Roadster. The Roadsters are now 17 years old. Many of them still have the legacy original battery packs in them.
And still going strong.
Still going strong. No end of life indication. The earliest indication we have of what an end of life event is going to be with these 18650 cells is what happened to the first generation 3.0 pack replacement for the Roadster, where they used inferior cells and they began to lose power.
Right.
The legacy packs don't have that problem.
As far as continuing to maintain your battery, one of the best things I could recommend was number one, do the occasional trickle charge. No, so you don't even have to always do the 240 volt charge. Do that occasional trickle charge. It seems that varying the charge rates, just as my anecdotal evidence, it seems to help. Secondly, charge your battery pack to 80 or 90%. Don't regularly charge it to 100%. That does cause the battery to heat up, and heat is what kills these batteries, probably more than any other thing that will cause a battery to die prematurely. The other thing that causes a battery to really start to heat up is if you pull that battery down below 20%. As you're trying to pull that last 20% of energy out of your battery, it's hard on the battery, and it tends to heat the cells up a lot because the percentage of voltage and that they're trying to draw is right at the maximum of what they can draw. So if you keep your charge between that 90% and 20% range, that helps your battery as well.
TikTok 555 Farang Lao Canada says, "Hello from Fort McMurray. I'm wanting to import a hybrid from China as soon as we ditch tariffs. The one I'm looking at is the BYD Leopard 8. Originally, I was looking at the Yangwang U8, but it's expensive. You know, there's some cool automotive excellence coming out of China these days.
Both of those cars are impressive cars.
They are indeed. Yes.
I have to admit, if you're gonna be able to get away from the tariffs, now Fort McMurray is probably not going to have the kind of electrical infrastructure we have down here in the southwestern U.S. So I could understand a hybrid there, but man, if you can get away with a true battery electric vehicle, BYD and Yangwang both have some pretty impressive models out there for the BEVs as well.
So it looks like most of our audience is expecting us to be live Tuesdays. We're not getting as many as we normally get, but let's go for a few more. There's a picture here that can be brought up, Jesse. It is a eBay Roadster with 575 original miles on it. Call it a barn find Roadster. It has been through our service center. The PPF's been removed. The yellows on the Arctic whites. And the asking on this is $300,000. So we're hoping that we get another $300,000 Roadster sale, which would definitely correct the market.
That would go a long ways toward helping the market. And what a beautiful car. They did really well on those pictures there.
Mm-hmm. Right. And, you know, we've got a few other small minor Roadster issues, but we can close at this point. We're running on 41 minutes. Again, this was a special Roadster podcast saved for this particular date, which is the 15-year anniversary of three engineers losing their lives in a plane crash, and the impact it had on Tesla, the community, and the tribute that is an Easter egg in each of the 2.X Tesla Roadsters.
Yeah, so thank you so much. I can't help but think of Brian's daughter. She's a junior in high school now.
That's true. Yes.
And it's just, wow, every year at this time must be a hard time for her. So our thoughts and prayers go out to the families.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow.